Today on More Than Home, we have a real-life superhero. You won't want to miss it.
Welcome to More Than Home podcast. I'm Lindsay Strobel, and this is my handsome husband, Hans Strobel. Quick reminder before we get started that we are realtors, and it's kind of a crazy market out there. So if you have any market questions, why it is the way it is, what it looks like to buy and sell right now, or any sort of general real estate questions, email us hi@threevinegroup.com, and we will get you taken care of. Okay, now on to the very exciting guest we have today. I feel like we need a drum roll, but our producer said we can't bang on the desk. So imagine it in your head. We have with us today the Southlake Texas Chief of Police, James Brandon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So when I introduce people, I normally go through a couple of things like that they're into or that they've done, just to kind of give people like a heads up.
Mm-hmm.
But in preparing to introduce you, I was like, okay, well, I probably shouldn't take an hour and a half just to do his intro because you've done everything I feel like that a police officer can do. So I decided to come up with this fun way to introduce him. I went through his bio, got my hands on his bio, and pulled out all of what I thought were cool topics or things that he's done. And I basically just made like a hit list, and I'm gonna read it off to you guys. And then we're gonna talk about them all. Okay, you guys ready? It's gonna be fun.
Let's do it.
Okay, patrol officer, training officer, lieutenant, captain, police executive research forum, senior manager, high risk search warrants, hostage situations, barricaded persons, death row, maximum security prison, homicides, organized crime unit supervisor, violent gang task force, officer involved shootings, internet crimes against children task force, joint terrorism task force, SWAT team, bomb squad, operations and training, and also cancer survivor. If I could drop this mic right now, I would do it because
Holden would yell at you.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I know. That's so impressive. I feel like you are the living, breathing version of what we make all our movies about. I didn't know that one person could actually do all those things, honestly.
Well, it's very nice of you. I think I'm pretty boring, so I'm still trying to figure out who exactly you're talking about.
This is your life.
Although that's been spread over, I think, the better part of 24 years
Yeah.
at this point. So, we don't all accumulate those things quickly. But
Sure.
I've been very fortunate to have a long career that I got to do many different things in. And if I
Yeah.
could have sort of charted out what I wanted to do in police work, when I look back on it, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do most of those things.
Yeah.
And, come through them relatively unscathed so far.
Yeah. So rewind the clocks a little bit. How did you get started in law enforcement?
Yeah.
According to my parents, my first law enforcement activity was a little battery-powered police motorcycle that I used to use to stop my older brothers in the living room when I was like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I think. I have vague memories of it. It seems like police work is made up of two different sort of kinds of people. One are the people who have just always wanted to do that. They don't know what else they would do. That's always been where their sights were set. There's another group that almost sort of falls into it because it's a great job. You can stay there for a long time. You've got a pension at the end of it, et cetera, et cetera. Those are both equally great groups to have. But I was in that first one where police work is what I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
I started out actually with the Illinois Department of Corrections, which was really the job that I had while I was deciding sort of where I wanted to be a police officer and how that was going to work out and getting as prepared as I needed to be for it. So in retrospect, it was really good training. I worked in a maximum security prison, and I worked in segregation and on death row. And the only weapon that you have in that environment really is pepper spray. So within a prison, anything you have can be taken away from you. So the only place that there are dedicated weapons are up in the secure towers and places like that where inmates cannot get to them. So when you're amongst the inmates, you really don't have anything other than pepper spray. Some places will have batons. We did not.
Yeah.
Really, your weapon is your ability to communicate and your wit. So when I look back on it now, it was really good training because if you can stand in the middle of inmates that are in segregation and maximum security. So that means they're already in maximum security and they already can't get along in that environment, so they've been further segregated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Or the inmates that are on death row. If you can communicate with them effectively to be able to get them to roughly do what you need done, and for everybody to be safe, then you can communicate with anybody after that. I always joke that it was a great training to be a parent, because if you can handle them, your kids are going to be okay, right?
Yeah, wow. Did you plot that course out? That's quite the list. I mean, was this planned out, or did it just sort of happen to you?
Well, I think of it sort of in two different things. There's the agencies that I worked for. So again, when I started out with the Department of Corrections, that was a good job to have in preparation for being a police officer. As far as being an officer, my plan was to apply to Corpus Christi Police Department, which is the majority of what you read. That's where that's from. If that did not pan out, then it was Las Vegas Police Department or Los Angeles Police Department, simply because all three of those were good departments that were hiring at the time. And whether or not you get hired can come down to things as simple as budgetary conditions. They've frozen hiring for the next year, things like that. So really, it's smart to kind of plan out multiple places if you have the ability to do that and the ability to move. And at the time, it was just me. I was single, didn't have any kids, so could really go wherever I wanted to. So it got hired with Corpus Christi PD, and then was there all the way through February of 2013 when I came to Southlake. So it was a great police department to work for. But then as you get into it, your first goal was to survive, quote unquote, survive the police academy, which really isn't bad. But in that role, you're just learning to be a good cadet, right? You learn that environment, you learn how to do well in it. Then you have to learn how to be a good police officer. And then at some point you look around and think, well, I wonder if I could promote, or like with most of us, really, I think what happens is you watch what your boss is doing, and at some point you think, I think I could do that. So, you go, or I went through these competitive promotional processes in Corpus Christi and eventually became a lieutenant and then a captain, and then got a job offer to come to Southlake as the assistant chief of police, which was another competitive process against a lot of very qualified people, and got that job, and then got promoted to chief, I believe, in April of 2015. As far as the different positions and the different kinds of activities that I got to do, that's really just a matter of doing the job as best you can within the police department or within whatever role that you're in. And then these things suddenly come up and make themselves available to you. And you all know, it doesn't mean that they fall in your lap. It's a result of hard work and preparation and doing the best job that you can. But over the course of the 24 years, those things happen kind of gradually. It feels like it's not all at once. And then when I look back on it and hear, you mention all those things, I think, wow, that is a lot. But, it comes in pieces.
Wow.
So what's a bigger adrenaline rush? Working on the SWAT team, or like walking down death row?
Bomb squad.
Or bomb squad.
Well, they're all just very different things. Obviously.
He's so calm about it. We just said SWAT team and bomb squad.
Well, to me, that's the context of my job, right? It's a normal. Amazing. Those are all normal things in my world, and I think all police officers probably feel this way. We get accustomed to that, and we don't realize that other people find it to be exceptional until you say something and someone reacts, and you think, I guess that isn't normal, is it? For us, if it wasn't normal every day for us, and you couldn't effectively function in the environment, at some point it's got to just be where you are, and you learn to think through it and handle things as they come. As far as an adrenaline rush, to answer your question, they are different things in terms of the pacing and in terms of the things that can happen. So in a prison environment, your goal is actually for nothing to happen, if that makes sense. Now, not that the inmates don't have activities and things like that. They do, but those things are predetermined, and what we want is no fights, no weapons, no exceptional kind of activity. Whereas the police world is different. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have nights where nothing is happening, because at some point you got to be able to take a breath. But in the police world, we want to be able to go out and proactively do good. We're police officers by their nature are problem solvers. They tend to be type A people who want to help, but they don't sit back and watch things go on around them. They tend to take control of them and aim them in a positive direction. So police work is a little bit opposite in that regard, because you're going out and trying to find the things that you can do and the things that you can affect. So the SWAT team is sort of like the scalpel of police work, if that makes sense. So it's a very exact tool that has to be used in very exact sets of circumstances. It's a tool in the toolbox. So you don't use a hammer on a screw.
Right.
So because of the level of force that a SWAT team can wield, has to be used very judiciously, very responsibly. But it is the highest risk situations that generally exist in police work.
Yeah.
Now those situations first manifest themselves with a patrol officer normally. Like the SWAT team doesn't get dispatched to just go to whatever. It starts out with a call for service or with a patrol officer handling something, and he or she needs more help and more equipment than they have there, and that's when the SWAT team would respond to that. So, I would say, again, to answer your question directly, the SWAT team is the bigger adrenaline surge. But again, if you talk to SWAT officers while they're functioning, they don't regard it that way.
Really?
No, there's actually been some studies conducted where they've put heart rate monitors and different things like that on SWAT officers, and their heart rates at times will actually decrease immediately before they have to take some kind of action.
Wow.
Because their body's just trained to exist in that environment, and for them it's just a matter of focus.
Yeah.
So we always had our moments later, when you walked in and thought, whew, it was a close one.
Yeah.
Like coming down off
right.
of it is
but
almost
in
more.
that environment, it doesn't really exist that much for us, if that makes sense.
The psychology behind like police work and the mindset you guys have to have is fascinating to me.
Yes, and it's good and it's bad.
Sure.
Simply because it's really good for our job, but it's not necessarily really good for your participation in the rest of society.
Right.
So my wife would tell you that my ability to stand in the middle of a chaotic situation and see the path through it and be very calm is why I've been successful at my job. But are there times at home when I should react or get excited about something and I handle it by going, wow, look at that? Because that's my nature. That's just where we're at all the time.
Yeah.
So sometimes those forces are in opposition a little bit. But it's how we just become conditioned to work.
Yeah. What was your favorite of all the jobs or roles that you've played? Do you have a favorite?
It's hard to just give you one because they all had sort of different aspects that are very rewarding. So in terms of SWAT, there will never be a group of people that I am closer to than the guys that were on the SWAT team with me in Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
Simply because when you're in those kind of acute situations, you depend a great deal on the person that's next to you. Down to thinking, okay, my job is to cover this window and this doorway of the house, and I'm going to ignore all the rest of it, even though I can get hurt from there because the guy next to me, that's his responsibility. That takes a little getting used to.
Yeah.
So SWAT was great for that aspect. Internet crimes against children was great because the bad guys that we dealt with there were evil. Those kids are absolute true victims. Those are the detectives that are undercover on the internet that are dealing with child pornography. So it's a very difficult place to work simply because of the subject matter. We had to regulate even when the cleaning people could come in and out of the office because at a given time there's child pornography being assembled in the case on the conference room table. So I always felt like, as far as kind of your bang for your buck in police work, there's probably nothing I'll ever do that's better than that. However, when it was over, I was also relieved it was over because I didn't have to exist in that environment every day. In terms of being a chief, that's great because I have the ability to positively affect the lives of our police officers and our civilian staff, as well as all the citizens that live in Southlake. So they're different things. I think I would run into a problem if I sort of painted them all with the same brush because they kind of satisfy different aspects
I like that perspective.
of my personality, I guess.
Yeah.
So I try to look at them differently.
Yeah.
Well, so you mentioned Southlake. We're residents there, and we're very appreciative of all the hard work that you do. And what do we call it? Your team, your force. But one thing that's really, really cool about Southlake is you guys have an outstanding social media presence.
People love
the posts
them.
are hilarious. Yeah.
So we pulled a couple off of y'all's Instagram page because I just feel like it's so different than a lot of people feel about their local police. Like Southlake people love
Like
our
that,
police
right there.
officers.
I feel like that's not what you normally see or expect
I
to
was doing
see.
the freeze.
No, it's not. But you hit on it when you talked about the fact that
I like
people
that
love
one.
it and it's not what you normally see.
Yeah.
That's by design and that's by the strategy of it. We wanted to be able to to rewind a little bit. When we started this strategy within our social media, what we wanted to undertake was what we called humanizing the badge, which is helping people to understand that your local police officers are people too, and they got senses of humor just like you do, and the things that bother you bother us, and et cetera, et cetera. So instead of these very sort of government-ease kind of posts that you tend to not read, you just gloss over, just like I do. We wanted it to be something engaging that also had a public safety message in it so that you would actually stop and read it. And if you laugh, that's great because we need some levity in the world we live in. But even more so, whenever we have something really important to say, you're going to stop and actually read it because of the method of communication that we've set up and the things that are contained within it. So whenever I hear somebody say, "Hey, I love to read it," you guys aren't saying what normal quote unquote police departments say. Those are good things because we want people to listen to us.
Yeah. I think it's very different, and I just super enjoy it and appreciate the Southlake Police Department. They're so different and great.
And so it says Southlake Police and Fire. So do you guys work pretty closely with the fire department?
Yes, and you'll often see that in smaller towns. Southlake's about 30,000 people, but it's just a matter of really efficiency and economics to some degree. It doesn't make sense to stand up separate things. We do work closely. If you think about it, police and fire make a lot of the same calls. If there's anybody hurt on a call or the potential for somebody to be hurt, the fire department is there with us. Right. And vice versa. Sometimes they get to a call that's just some sort of illness in nature that doesn't require us, and they realize that they need us for something else that's going on around them or in the home. So we're there a lot together. So we do communicate together on that page, and it works well.
Is there any sort of like friendly brotherly rivalry type of stuff that
of
goes
course.
on?
There always is.
Who's better?
Like in the movies?
We are, to answer your question.
Okay, there we go.
We'll have to have the fire chief.
Yeah, right.
We always rib each other, but you're right. It's very sort of fraternal. It's, we're both engaged in the same purpose, which is keeping people safe. And we're at a lot of the same activities, a lot of the same calls for service. We occupy two different ends of the same building. So we're close together at the end of the day, whether we like it or not. So it works out well. We've got a lot of great firemen.
So speaking of Southlake, tell us about Southlake, just from your world and your perspective. Like, how safe is it? Where does it rank? What are the crimes that happen there? Kind of just.
Sure. So in general, I would characterize it by saying that Southlake is a safe city, and it's one of the reasons that people like to live there. The school district is always cited as a top reason, rightfully so. The shopping availability, the dining availability, and it's also safe. Now, I always feel like when I say it's safe, that I sort of have to put a caveat on the end of that doesn't mean that you can't be the victim of something, and we do need your help to make sure that you don't become that. But in terms of violent crime rates or persons crimes, what we have in Southlake is very low, and we work hard to keep it that way. But again, it's always followed from us with a public safety message of please make sure that you lock your cars and please make sure that you lock your front doors. If somebody does want to break into your car, we do want to make it a little more of a challenge than just opening the door. And please don't leave your expensive purses and computers and things like that laying around in plain sight, because that makes it that much easier to take them. So it is safe. It's not by accident. There's a lot of hard work that goes on in the background to keep it that way. Our patrol officers are very busy. There are times that people look at a city like Southlake and think, well, it's a pretty safe city. They must be bored, and that's really not the case, because the reason it stays that way is all the work that's going on in the background to keep it that way. It's not an accident. It's due to the hard work of the men and women that are on our police force.
And how many officers do you guys have?
67.
Okay. Nice. And the town has how many people?
About 30,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and that includes our school resource officers as well.
Yeah.
So normally you would see that number be a bit lower for the population that we have,
Yeah.
but we've got 15 total that are dedicated simply to the schools.
Sure.
Oh, I
So
love
that bumps
ours.
that number up a little bit.
He's
Yeah.
great.
The Johnson Elementary dude is
Yeah.
awesome.
Shout out.
Yeah, they're a great group. They really are.
Okay, so you also beat cancer in 2020 as
I
the
did.
chief of police.
Mhm.
Can you tell me about that? What was that like?
Sure. When you say that, it sounds like a past tense thing, and I don't necessarily feel like it's past tense because, as you know, it kind of is an ongoing thing. I'm going through my every 3-month checks now as we speak. So there's always, even though there's no signs of cancer now, when that rolls around, there's always some level of where you just go,
Anxiety.
because you're waiting
Yeah.
on, or what I've learned is called scanxiety for cancer patients, where you're waiting on them to tell you something that you don't want to hear. But mine was gastric cancer, and I don't know how much detail you want. I certainly don't mind, but and that was probably February of last year. I could just feel it. I could just feel a pain that I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I could tell it was something with my throat. It didn't feel like my chest, although it was in here.
Oh, yeah.
So fast forward through some tests, they wound up running a camera down there, and I woke up from the endoscopy for the doctor to basically say, hey, I've still got to send the biopsies off, but I've done this a long time, and I can tell you that what I saw in there is cancer. So at that point, it was just a question of whether it was esophageal cancer or stomach cancer or gastric.
Right.
So they were able to narrow it down, and then fast forward eight chemos and 2 surgeries later, and as of right now, the cancer is gone.
Woo.
Yeah, they took out the bottom part of my throat, my whole stomach, and 20 lymph nodes. And through the blessings of modern medicine and awesome surgeons and awesome oncologists, somehow they put all that back together. And I'm okay.
That's
And
amazing.
I try not to think too much about how all that could possibly work, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But they were good at what they did.
That's amazing.
So both of you guys have survived and beaten cancer, and I got stuck by a sticker the other day when I was pulling weeds, and I survived. So
Same.
I mean, I feel like
same.
the three of
you.
us, just
We're
strong
survivors.
people.
Yeah.
So
I would have people would tell me, especially when I was going through the process, "Oh, you're so tough," or they're being positive, and I would, and that's nice of them to say, but I would think, at the time I was 45 years old. I've got a wife and 2 kids, and I don't particularly want to die yet. So I mean, what do you want? What do you do? Do you just roll up in
There's
the
no
corner
choice,
and die? Or, so for me, it didn't feel like I was being tough. It just felt like, okay, here's the problem that you've been presented with. We've charted the path forward. So now let's execute the plan. And so far it's worked out. So I never felt like I was doing anything exceptional. It wasn't something I signed up for,
Right.
Just
True.
one day you're okay, and the next day you've been told you have cancer, and it may or may not kill you. And it takes a little while to kind of wrap your brain around.
Sure does.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask real quick, got a little out of sync there, but 2020 was kind of a crazy year with just everything going on socially, economically, COVID, all of that. But police were, a pretty big focus in the media for quite some time, especially early 2020.
Yes.
Did that touch Southlake at all? Did you guys feel any of that?
Of course. So first, let me give a great deal of credit to Ashley Casey, who's my assistant police chief, because when all that started, I was out undergoing the chemos and surgery and all that. So she and I talked regularly, but her leadership is really what led the department through that in that moment, as opposed to mine. So police work is interesting in that you could be in California, let's say, and get pulled over by an officer and have some kind of negative encounter. You thought he or she was rude, or you didn't understand what happened, or whatever the case may be. And then I run into you next week here, and you'll tell me about it.
Right.
Because for police work, it's applicable to you no matter where you are and no matter who the officer is.
Right.
So when things happen in part of the country, it really does affect all of us.
Wow.
So I've heard people say, well, that shouldn't bother you guys in Southlake. But everybody sees that. Everybody feels it. Our officers feel it.
Yeah.
We hear it from people during our interactions. We hear it on traffic stops, certainly. So we have to manage those expectations and people's reactions just like anyone does. And those moments, and George Floyd, his murder is what specifically sparked that. Those are sort of paradigm shifts for law enforcement. We are as deeply offended by that as anyone is, really. I've been fortunate to work around good police officers my career, and they don't want those people in their midst. We don't want those people working in our profession. We don't want anything to do with them. But as society changes and society's expectations change, police work has to change with that and adapt to that. We are there for society. To bore you with a history lesson, a long time ago in England, there was a guy named Sir Robert Peel who penned sort of the fundamental tenets of police work, and one of his was that the police are society and that society are the police, and another one was that we only police with the consent of society. And what that actually means is, as a whole, if society decided the police department is not going to exist anymore, then it wouldn't. We live in a free country. You consent to our interaction with you, if you think about it.
That's right,
so police work has to adapt with society's wants and needs and desires. Otherwise, we're in two different places. And that's when we miss each other, and that's when further problems and further divisions really develop. So, you know, we can see something happen across the country and think, well, our department didn't do that, would never do that, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to get past that in about 2 seconds and figure out how it's going to affect you and what you need to do. Because our officers still need guidance and leadership on how we're going to handle it and what our expectations are for them and for their reactions to those things. And our citizens need to be reassured that we've got the policy and practices and training in place to ensure that things like that don't happen here.
That's
Protect
great.
and serve.
Well, I did want to say, so Lindsay's dad was a police officer. My grandfather was a highway patrolman, and he lost his life in the line of duty. My uncle was a highway patrolman. I've got family in the corrections department. So we have a deep, deep appreciation for what you guys do. And now living in Southlake, you know, we get to see firsthand what you're specifically doing with your department. So just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you for coming on. And then we kind of have a signature question, if you will. So when people find out that we're realtors, they always want to know, how's the market? Right now it's insane. But for you, when people find out that you're the chief of police, what's the question that you get?
You know, it's kind of loaded when people find that out. So a lot of police officers are like this, but I want to kind of frame there, give you the right context for this. In general, so it's Saturday, I'm not at work, I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, you know, going to Lowe's or whatever.
Wait, you don't always wear this?
I've got a onesie that I sleep in that looks like this.
Thank you.
Zips up.
Thank you.
So when I'm wearing when I'm wearing normal clothes, we don't generally advertise what we do for a living because that generates reactions in people. So for instance, if I'm going to run around on my time off and wear a shirt that says Southlake Police on it, that means I need to make sure that I'm armed. And if I'm armed, I need to have a way to restrain somebody that's causing a problem. So now I need my handcuffs. And if I need all that, then I probably need to call for help. So now I need my radio. So I might as well just run around in my uniform 7 days a week. It's kind of the way that it works for us. So usually police officers try to just be as inconspicuous as possible in their time off. When people find out I'm a chief of police, a lot of people's reaction actually is, what is that? People don't really understand what that role is. I regard that mostly as a good thing because what that means is you haven't needed us. You haven't been involved with us, and that's okay. We don't want you to need us. So if you've been able to live your life and you haven't been a victim of anything, and you haven't been in need of our assistance, then the goal is accomplished. Sort of wanting to work ourselves out of a job, if you will. So I always tell people, well, think of it like, I'm the CEO of a 73-person company whose business is public safety. You go, okay, that makes sense. So it's really just a matter of explaining it to people. But I'm very content when people ask what I do to just say I'm a police officer. Now, I know I occupy this position as chief of police, but at my core, I'm just a police officer, and I'm no different than any of the other officers that are on our department. So I'm pretty content to leave it at that.
Our kids were super excited that you were coming on,
Yes.
and their only question was, "Has he shot anyone?" So you don't have to answer that, but I feel like that's the kid question, and also I'm basically a giant child, so I was, it's fine.
Throwing it out there.
If you go back, let's see, number of years, say like early 2000s, like pre-huge video game days.
Yeah.
Kids would want to know, say we're going to speak to a class at school, they would want to know, what kind of gun do you have? And they would ask questions like that. And now they go, is that a Glock Model 22 or a 40 caliber? And why don't you use this and that? And it's video games.
I didn't think about the effects of video games.
Those kids know more about guns than I do.
Thanks a lot, Grand
And a lot
Theft
of
Auto.
police officers.
Oh.
Yeah, it's they're living in a bit of a different world
Yeah, they are.
than we did.
That's true. I didn't think about that. Wow.
All
right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
It's always
So
exciting
so
to talk to you. That being said, where am I looking? Right here. Hey, if you guys have any questions for us or for the Chief of Police, feel free to reach out, hi@3vinegroup.com, and we'd love to help. We'll see you next time.